Good afternoon to all of my History 289 students. This is your Professor Donald Earl Collins. And when I say all of my History 289 students, I mean all sections of History 289 that I have taught, am teaching, and will teach for UMUC from here on. So this is the first day of an 8-week course, and so welcome to the first day of this 8-week course. What I'll go over the next few minutes are basically a little bit of an introduction to who I am and introduction to the course and expectations for this said course. And that's pretty much it, to just give you some sort of glide and guide into the next 8 weeks, which will be fairly intense. So, a little bit about me. In addition to teaching at UMUC, which I have done for nearly 11 years, I am also a professor, part-time professor at American University, teaching courses in African American history on race in the U.S. at American University. But in terms of my overall history, I've been at UMUC for the last 11 years, teaching courses in African American history, in U.S. history, in world history, and of course in technological transformations, which is sort of world history, but from a technological development standpoint. So those are my course experiences. Some of my experiences have included teaching courses, upper level courses in things like recent American history and in African American history. Recent American history, by the way, is U.S. history from 1945 to the present. So I've also taught a course in the social history of Washington, D.C. So that's my experience at UMUC. I've also taught courses that have been related to historical methods. I've taught a historical methods course in the Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University about 11 years ago, before I came on board at UMUC. I've taught courses related to historical methods in the schools of education at Duquesne University in the 1990s and at George Washington University, or GW, in the early zeros. So, but those are grad level courses, and the course at Howard, by the way, was an upper level undergrad as well. So this is not my first rodeo with historical methods courses, but it is my first time teaching an online historical methods course, and so which will be a little bit different. I've taught, since I've been teaching at UMC for over the last 11 years, half of the courses I've taught have been online anyway, so I do have experience doing that, but this is new. And the reason why I bring up the fact that this is new is because this is probably the fastest paced course I've ever taught, and it will be a very fast paced course for you as well. So I want to emphasize something right away. I mean, it's really, really important to emphasize. Normally I would tell students the first day of any class, that it's important to keep up with this course. With you guys in History 289, it is almost impossible for you to catch up with this course if you miss the first 2 weeks. That is to say, if you don't do the readings the first 2 weeks, if you don't finish the first assignment in the first 2 weeks, if you don't have an eye for the upcoming assignments that are coming up for week 3 on, you know, cataloging sources and the cataloging sources exercise, or your how historians create history paper, which, by the way, we don't, but I'll talk about that more when we get to week 4 and week 5, which is due week 5. Your second reflective paper, which is due week 7, your final assessment paper, which is due week 8. There's a lot of reading to do in this class, and there's a lot of assessments or assignments to do in this course over the course of those weeks. That's not even counting the discussions, which cover all these readings. So really, really, really important to keep up with everything that's going on. I'm not saying that there is no possibility to catch up if you don't make it through the first 2 weeks, having stayed on track, but it will be next to impossible. If students have a hard time with a course like Intro to World History or Technological Transformations, where the reading is basically 50 pages or less per week, a course that has a couple hundred pages worth of reading, and some weeks even more than that, in 8 weeks, really, really hard to do. And keep this in context. This is a historical methods course, which is typically a course for history majors. I realize that some of you aren't history majors. Maybe some of you aren't even studying a social science as a major. But even if that's the case, whether you are a history major or not, the course is designed for history majors, which means it's designed to go at a fairly rapid pace. And this course, at most universities, this is a 1 or 2 semester course, meaning it can cover 16 to 32 weeks worth of material. We are covering the equivalent of about 16 to 18 weeks worth of material, literally, in 8 weeks. Which means there's a lot of stuff that's left out. We're not covering everything. We're covering a lot of things, but we're not covering everything. We're not covering existentialism in history. We're not covering quantitative methods and how to do quantitative methods in a historical methods course. Not just the fact that they're quantitative methods, but the idea of doing something like chi-squared multivariate analysis, or doing multivariate regression analysis. Or looking at large data sets like census data, like other demographic data, and cliometrics and other kinds of data to basically figure out how people's average height went from 5'7", or excuse me, men's height went from an average of say 5'2" to 5'7" between the end of the 18th century and the middle of the late 20th century. Those kinds of things, right? Not doing that. So we're not covering everything. We're covering a lot of things, but we're not covering everything. And so it's imperative, even in that scope of not covering everything, there's still a lot of material to read. So it's important to read it and read it well. But by reading it and reading well, I don't simply mean just reading it word for word. One thing that you will have to learn as history students and potentially historians is to read for an argument. This is an important skill. If you have not developed it up to this point, this is the course to do with it. The ability to read an introduction, figure out the most salient points that an author or group of authors is making in that introduction, and then find examples that support or disprove or show the limits of what they are trying to do in those things, means that you are literally looking for stuff. You are interrogating the readings. You are looking for stuff that actually fits what the authors are saying they're doing, or actually disproves what the authors are saying they're trying to do in what they're reading. That's what you are doing. I have no expectations that all of you will be able to read cover to cover every single article and every single thing that is in History 289. There's just simply too much reading and too short a period of time to do it for me to expect you to read it word for word. But I do expect you to read for an argument. I do expect you to know the most salient features of what Foucault is saying, or Tilly is saying, or Davis is saying, or Beard is saying, or any number of the historians and other social scientists that you'll be reading in this course are saying in terms of their argument, their perspective on history, their perspective on historiography, their perspective on a particular piece of history, the methodology or methodologies that they use to interrogate that piece of history. So that's what my expectations are of you regarding this, so that you have time to actually sit down and write cogent discussion responses to the discussion questions I have posted for each week, so that you have time to do these papers and assignments that are due weeks 1, 3, 5, 7, and 8, so that you have time to really actually understand what it is you're learning and to get something out of this. If nothing else, the ability to read for an argument, so that you can take something that's 200 pages and really only read 30 or 50 pages of it and still understand the gist of what the author said from cover to cover, right? That's what you're trying to do. That's what you're trying to do here. That's what I'm hoping that you learn here. So, I don't really have anything else to add in terms of an introduction besides keeping pace. Trying to make this as fun as possible, but this is a difficult course. For history majors and even for non-history majors, this might be one of the more difficult courses you have to take. So I just want to be honest and fair here and letting you know what you are getting yourselves into, and to make sure that in getting into it that you do still have some enthusiasm about what you are reading and what you are learning. So welcome.